Hey guys, this is Laura from the Sketching Pad. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to paint this sunset scene. I'm going to show you what comes in your kit. So if you purchased a kit from us, you're going to need these colors. You're going to need red, yellow, orange, purple, white, and black. In your kit also came a medium round brush and a small round brush. You'll want to have both of those for this. You're going to need your mixing plate and some things to have on hand from your house would be a glass of water. You can use a mason jar, you can use a solo cup, something disposable, that's fine. And you want a cloth or a paper towel that you don't mind either throwing away or getting ruined. Like the acrylic is not going to come out of your rag. So make sure it's not a nice rag if you decide to use a rag. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sketch out our mountains. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my medium round brush and I'm just going to sketch this with acrylic paint. Keep in mind acrylic paint is permanent, so if you're wearing something nice, you probably want to either put an old t-shirt on or something like that. You can also sketch the mountains with a pencil, so you don't have to use the paintbrush if you don't want to, but I'm just going to do it with the paintbrush. So the first thing we're going to do is take and draw a straight line across the canvas. I'm using purple because our mountains are kind of purple anyway. And it doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line, and it doesn't have to be all filled in. Mine's kind of like sketchy and wobbly. And then you're going to do the wavy line for the tops of the mountains. So since this is a mirrored image, you kind of want the top and bottom to be similar, but they don't have to be exactly the same. So I've got my mountains kind of like that. That's going to work out just fine. So once you have your mountains sketched in, you want to go ahead and blow dry this if you used paint because we don't want our purple to blend into our sky. So I'm going to use a blow dryer, but you can let it air dry for like 5 or 10 minutes if you want to, and then just rejoin us when you're ready. All right, so now that it's dry, we're going to do a gradient. Now this is a gradient from purple to yellow, and what you're going to do is you want to take your medium round brush again, and you're just going to dip straight into your pods and then apply the paint horizontally and then work it down to the mountains. So you don't want to be going like this, you don't want to be going at an angle, you want to be going left to right, back and forth. So I'm going to start with my purple, and you're just going to apply it straight to the canvas. The key to making a gradient is you want to be working with wet paint, and what that means is that you don't want to wait for this purple to dry before you start adding your red, because it won't blend in if you wait for it to dry. So I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to grab my red, and I'm going to work it onto the canvas and back into the purple a little bit. So you can see how it starts to blend, and it makes like that kind of burgundy, magenta, red violet-y color when it blends. And then we're going to take and dip into our orange, and we're going to do the same thing. You don't have to rinse your brush in between colors. You want to just dip it straight in. The only time you may want to rinse your brush a little is if you had like too much purple or something in it. By the time you get to the orange, if there's too much purple in there, it may make your orange brown, but It doesn't matter a ton if you have some brown streaks because it is a sky. Skies have texture and variation to them. So once you're finished with your orange, you're just going to dip right into your yellow, and you're going to work that yellow into the orange. And then you'll continue the yellow down to the mountains. So you can see that I've got some of that orange streaking in to the yellow. That is absolutely fine because skies are naturally streaky. In many ways, it looks more realistic that way. All right, so now that I'm finished with the sky, I'm going to do the water. And so now at this point, I want to rinse my brush off because it has yellow in it. And yellow and purple do make brown, so you want to make sure you don't have any yellow in there when you go back to doing your purple. So you can do this where you're reaching over the top. You can do this right here, or you can flip it if you need to. Whatever makes your hand more comfortable. We did our sky first, so our water is closer to us at this point, but just keep in mind that you can rotate your canvas however you need to make it more comfortable for you. So I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. And I'm going to add a little red. And then we're going to go straight to the orange, just like we did before. Just remember to keep your brush going side to side. All right, then you're going to go right for your yellow. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow into my orange right there. And then I'm going to go all the way down with my yellow. Now, if at any point you feel like you have too much orange or something in your brush, you can rinse it. So I'll just rinse it a little here. And go back in with the brightest orange right next to the mountains. All right. So now that we're finished with that, I'm going to blow dry it, and then we're going to do our sun. So just make sure that your sky is really, really dry so that our sun doesn't blend in to the sky or the water. All right, so now that it's dry and our brush is all rinsed off, we're going to do our sun. So you're going to take your mixing plate for this, and you're going to take a scoop of your white, and you're going to take a scoop of your yellow, and you're going to mix those together on your plate. Now I'm going to just go ahead and freehand my sun with the acrylic paint, but if you want to, you can take a circular object like the lid to a baby food jar or something like that, and you can trace it with a pencil first and then paint your sun. If that makes you feel more comfortable, but I'm just going to go ahead and freehand it. So you're just going to take and do a half circle. You want it to be relatively large. You don't want it to be too small, just because you want it to stand out. This is the focus of your picture. And then you're just going to fill it in. It doesn't matter if you paint into your mountains. All right, so now that we have our half circle, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. You want it to be in a similar position to the one that you just made, so a little bit lower. So like right underneath it. So once you have your circle, then you'll fill it in. Acrylic is very forgiving because you can always cover over what you don't like, or if you're having a problem getting your sun the right shape, you can paint over it again with the sky, just repeat the first step, or when you're doing your mountains by going if your sun or your sky goes inside the mountains, it's totally fine because the mountains will cover. So now that our sun is done, we're going to dry it, and then we're going to do our mountains. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you a couple techniques for mountains. All right, so now that it's dry, there's, like I said before, there's a couple ways you can do the mountains. So one of them is if you take a scoop of your red, you're going to pre-mix the color onto your plate. Take a scoop of red and a scoop of purple, maybe 2 scoops of purple, depending on if you want your mountains to be more purple or more red. And mix it together until you get like this burgundy color. And then you can just take and trace the edge of your mountains like this, and then apply it flat on the inside. So that's one way you can do it. If you want your mountains to be a little bit more textured, what you can do is you can just dip your brush into the purple and dip it into the red and kind of vary it back and forth like this. And it's just going to give you a little bit more variation between the purple and red instead of it being quite as solid. You might be able to see that a little bit better right there. Now, if you are concerned about losing your center line while you're painting, what you can do is take your brush and get really close to it and kind of leave a little bit of a gap right there. But it also doesn't matter if you cover it because we are going to add these little accent lines in here anyway. The only thing I will suggest, either technique, either the mixing on the plate technique or the dipping into the pod technique, is if you choose to mix it and do that everywhere, then you want to do it on both sides because this is a reflection into the water. You want it to, if you want it streaky, you want both sides to be streaky. If you want it flat, you want both sides to be flat. And you can also do a variation of both. Like you can pre-mix a color, use that, and then dip into the pods. Just make sure if you're doing any dipping, you want to dip on both sides, just so they look similar to each other, similar style. Just want to be consistent about it, whatever you choose. All right, we are almost done. Okay. So now that we have the base coat for our mountains, we're going to add some highlights. So you can kind of see them right in here. They're little white highlights. So if you have a lot of paint still left on your brush, you can kind of twirl it on your mixing plate to get some of that paint off, or you can take and wipe it on your rag just a little. That's only if you have like a lot of paint on there. You don't want to rinse your brush necessarily for this because we do want to do a lot of blending, and it's good to have some of the color on there. You just don't want a ton. So you're going to take and barely dip it into the white. You don't want a big glob on your brush, just a small little bit on the end. And then you're going to just add it into the wet paint of your mountains and kind of do your brush strokes back and forth like this. To get it to blend in. You can always add more if you don't feel like it's standing out enough. But it's best to start with small amounts of paint and then work your way up to larger amounts of paint. And remember, the key to blending with acrylic is working on top of wet paint. So you don't want your mountains to dry out. But if they do, you can always add some more of the purple and red to it. So now we're going to add some streaks to the middle. So you're going to just take your white like you had been doing. You're just going to go back and forth like this until you have a nice little highlight in the middle. So I'm going to show you closer up what that looks like. You can tell the difference between the two or compare them. Like these mountains are maybe a little bit darker and these have a little bit more red in it. But you can adjust that easily by adding more purple if you want to. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to do our foliage. So I'm going to blow dry the mountains and I'll be right back. Okay, so now that the mountains are dry, we're going to do our foliage with either the small round brush or the medium round brush, whatever makes you feel most comfortable. And you're just going to need your black. So the key to making these little bushes down here at the bottom is that you want them to be in like little clusters. If you don't want to make them like bushes and you want them to be grass, then you don't have to put them in clusters. You can just kind of go straight up from the bottom. If you want to do it that way, that's totally fine, but I'm going to show you how to make them more bush-like. So you're going to take and load up your brush with your black, and what you want to do is basically give yourself a guide frond, and then you're going to build the other ones on top of it. So you're going to take and go from the bottom and flick your paintbrush up like that. And then you're going to go and build from that and go out and curl. So you're going to go like this. From that original frond that you did there. So it looks a little bit like that. So like I said, you can use either brush, whichever one you want. So I'm going to do this one here. You're going to go from the bottom out, make one frond, and then build from there. So just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the one in this corner over here, and then I'm going to do the other ones in the middle. So you're going to do like that. And then do little flicks from that frond. I'm going to do 2 more clusters here, but you don't have to, you can do more, you can do less. Like that. And then I'll add another one right in here to fill this gap a little. So feel free to make it look a little thicker. What we're going to do next is we're going to do these branches up at the top. So I'm going to rinse out my brush just so that I get a nice fine point again, but you don't have to do that because you are just using black. So the same principle is true here. You want to have one main branch and then other branches coming from it. So I'm going to do one right there. And then I'm going to build other branches from that. These are going to hang down because gravity would pull them down since they are like tree branches, whereas these are like bushes. So I'm going to do another one right here, and then you're going to add some other flicks from that there. Okay, so we'll do a few over here. I'm going to do one here. All right, and then this one. There we go. We're just coming both sides like that. All right, I'm going to rinse out my brush one more time so I get my fine point back again. And I'm going to have another one down here kind of going up. So like that. All right. So that's all that we really need. If you want to add more over here to fill in the gap, you certainly can. But I'm going to leave it as is. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put a little white highlight around the edge of my sun. I'm going to hold this a little closer. Hopefully you can see. There's like a little white highlight around the edge, and this one doesn't have it as much. So I'm going to just take my medium round brush and I'm going to add a little white to it. This is totally optional. It just makes the sun stand out a little bit more. You do not have to do this step if you don't want. All right. So I'm going to hold it up one more time for you guys. And you are done. Great job, guys. Let us know if you have any questions on our Facebook page. We'd be happy to give you a hand. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you had fun.